What's up guys, Asian here again with another theory crafting video, and in this video we're gonna answer a question that some new players have when they are asking for builds and things like that, or they're trying to create their own builds, or people who are just sort of new to the theory crafting scene, and that is, how do I tell whether one set is better than a second set? So a good example of this is, how can I tell that Mother Sorrow is going to be stronger than Burning Spellweave? So in this video, I'm going to show you guys 3 different methods to kind of basically how to tell whether a set is good, quote unquote, or how to compare 2 different sets against each other. Now these 3 methods can be used in conjunction with each other, or they can be used separately. It's kind of up to you, and each of them are kind of geared around a specific approach. So first method that I kind of want to talk about is what I like to call the overall set bonus method. This is a method that was used by LZH back when he used to play, and it's something that I think is a pretty good measurement between sets here. So for those of you guys who are kind of new to theory crafting, each set has its own different bonuses. You guys all know that 2, 3, 4, 5-piece bonuses. Now the 2, 3, and the 4-piece bonuses are all basically standardized across all the different sets. So no matter what set you have, if it adds max Magicka, it'll always add that same amount of max Magicka, assuming of course that rarity is equal to each other. So a full purple set with max Magicka as a 2-piece bonus will have the exact same max Magicka bonus as another purple set as a 4-piece bonus. So using that and keeping that in mind, we can basically say that, okay, one set bonus is equal to X amount of max Magicka, X amount of spell crit, X amount of spell damage. Of course, you can also translate this into stamina version as well. So for example, we're going to be using Mother Sorrow here as an example. So the 2, 3, and the 4-piece bonuses are max Magicka, spell crit, and spell crit. So each of these adds 1 to our overall set bonus number, because as you can tell, each of these adds 1 bonus. Now what happens if you have a resistance or a health bonus? Well, that bonus counts as 0. We're mainly looking at DPS increasing bonuses, so that would be max Magicka, spell crit, spell damage. We're basically saying that anything that adds anything that is not that is considered a 0. Now for the 5-piece, this is going to be a little bit trickier to translate because it is not a standardized set bonus. So for example, Julianos has 299 spell damage. Mother Sorrow in this case has 1879 spell crit. And then there are other sets that have proc chances. So for example, Scathing Mage has an increase of 516 to your spell damage, but a 20-second chance for 6 seconds. So how do we kind of reconcile all of these together? So basically what you're going to want to do for these types of sets, basically these are sets that have some sort of increase to your stats, so spell crit, weapon crit, spell damage, weapon damage, things like that. Basically take that 5-piece effect and then modify it based on the overall, based on the individual set bonus. So in this instance, again, we're using Mother Sorrow as an example here. A 5-piece adds 1879 spell crit. In terms of set bonuses, your standard 2, 3, 4 set bonuses, basically want to divide 1879 by 813. So if you do 1879 divided by 813, you get 2.3. So we just add 2.3 as our 5-piece bonus to Mother Sorrow, which gives us 5.3 as our overall set bonus. So that's how you would do it for flat bonuses. So this is, for example, Mother Sorrow or Julianos. So if we take a look at Julianos, Julianos is 299 spell damage. You would divide that by 129 because that is your standard for spell damage bonuses. So 299 divided by 129, and that gives us 299 divided by 129. That gives us 2.3. So for Julianos, your 5-piece bonus would add another 2.3. So Julianos would have another 5.3 when it comes to your overall set bonus. Now, we're going to take a look now at proc sets. So what about Scathing Mage or Burning Spellweave? Sets that basically increase our overall spell damage, but they're a proc set. They don't necessarily have 100% uptime like the flat bonuses like Julianos or Mother Sorrow. In this instance, you're going to be a little bit more involved, but the concept is still the same. You still want to divide, I should say, by the overall bonus, set bonus. So in this case, we would still want to divide that 516 by 129. However, we want to basically use the effective spell damage uptime. So for example, we're going to be using Burning Spell instead of Scathing Mage. Scathing Mage doesn't have a very good uptime, average uptime I should say. Burning Spellweave on the other hand, you can usually get 0.6, and the max uptime on Burning Spellweave is 0.66. So in that instance, you would take the spell damage boost from Burning Spellweave, which is 525, fully golded out, and you multiply that by the max uptime. So 525, and you multiply that by 0.66. That gives you 346.5. Now you divide that by your set bonus. So divide the 346.5 by 129, and you get 2.68 as your overall set bonus for that 5-piece. So Burning Spellweave then would have a 5.68 effective overall set bonus, making it a little bit stronger than Mother's Sorrow. Now, there is going to be some nuance involved in this, mainly because if you have greater Major Force uptime, it scales better with the higher crit chance that Mother's Sorrows provides compared to the additional spell damage that Burning Spellweave provides. So there is a little bit of nuance here and there, but overall this is a good way to kind of get a good sense of how these two sets kind of stack up against each other. Now, Master Architect is one of these sets, along with sets like Moondancer and Reliquin and Vicious Ophidian, that are going to be a little bit trickier to kind of figure out, because Minor Slayer is not what you would call a standard set bonus. Minor Slayer is a damage done modifier increase. So for purposes of figuring out overall set bonuses, you can basically take this as 1. You can even up it to like 1.2 or something like that if you want to be a little bit more generous, because damage done modifiers are fairly rare and they're actually pretty strong. Kind of the same thing with the 5-piece bonus here. Major Slayer with Master Architect or War Machine is a little bit trickier to kind of determine in terms of overall set bonus, because it's a very, very rare. It's actually the only way to get Major Slayer, so there's really no way to really compare it. But I usually just use the value of about 2.5 or so for Major Slayer, just because it's, again, much like Minor Slayer, it's a very strong buff, and it also applies to 2 other people besides you. So I usually use like 2.5 or something like that when I take a look at Master Architect. But Master Architect and War Machine are kind of the 2 outliers when it comes to using this method overall. Now, the second method I want to talk about is going to be geared more towards proc sets. So this first method is going to be used only for flat boosts or any set that has boosts to your basically character sheet statistics. So spell damage, spell crit, max Magicka, so sets like Necropotence, Burning Spellweave, Scathing Mage, Mother Sorrow, Julianos, those kind of sets. The second method I'm going to show you is going to be only for proc sets. That's because proc sets can't really translate that into standard set bonuses. So instead, what you're going to be doing is you're actually going to be taking a look at basically how much DPS it's able to provide. So swap over to our Unfathomable Darkness compared to Red Mountain. So you want to compare these 2 sets against each other. Now, something that I want to bring up here is the penetration. In terms of penetration as a set bonus, these are fairly rare. I don't know really how to really translate that. Penetration is going to be a little bit stronger overall compared to your standard weapon crit, and max stamina. So I would probably just say just keep it as 1 for right now, but it's a little bit stronger overall, just keep that in mind. Penetration is going to be a little bit weird, just because there's a set value that you want to hit for physical penetration. So to our 5-piece bonus though, so Unfathomable Darkness is another damage proc set. So you have a 12-second duration. For every 3 seconds you deal up to 4,000 physical damage, and this can occur every 15 seconds. Now the first challenge with dealing with these proc sets is how do you translate these into variable numbers. The obvious way is going to be just to use the DPS you're able to pull. So if we go take a look at Red Mountain, it deals 8400 flame damage every 2 seconds. Now if we're able to proc it every 2 seconds, we're taking a look at 8400 divided by 2 for overall DPS of 4200 flame damage. Now obviously it's not going to proc every 2 seconds. A more realistic number would probably be something like 3 or 4 seconds. So if we just take 4 seconds instead, we divide 8400 by 4 and we get 2100 flame damage per second. That's your overall DPS with the 5-piece bonus from Red Mountain. Now if we go and take a look at Unfathomable Darkness, this one's going to be a little bit trickier to kind of determine, but you're still able to do it. So you have 4000 physical damage every 3 seconds for 12 seconds. A total of 16,000 physical damage. Now this can occur every 15 seconds. So you want to multiply this by your uptime, which is 12 divided by 15, which ends up being 0.8. So you want to do 16,000, and that's divided by sorry, messing with school. So again, that's 4,000 damage every 3 seconds, 12 seconds, so a total of 16,000 damage over 12 seconds, and then you want to multiply this by your uptime, which is 0.8. So that's total DPS of about 1066.6. So that's how you can compare these two sets against each other here. So again, you can even just take a look at just 16,000 divided by 15 for the uptime, and then you get the exact same number here. So that's basically how you can compare two different damage proc sets together. You basically take your set bonuses and you compare them to each other. So let's say a set with max health for whatever reason, that's obviously going to be out. But if the 5-piece deals more DPS, then it is possible that it could be a little bit stronger overall. So in this instance here, we would say that Red Mountain is going to be a little bit stronger than Unfathomable Darkness, assuming you're able to proc Red Mountain every 4 seconds and you're able to proc Unfathomable Darkness every 15 seconds. That's one of the dangers with kind of compare proc sets, is that the proc conditions are going to be pretty important when you take a look at like uptime and things like that. So Unfathomable Darkness has 10% chance, Red Mountain has 10% chance. So you kind of want to take that into consideration when you want to compare proc sets against each other. Again, this is one of those small nuances that's very hard to kind of take into consideration against each other. So that's basically the second way of kind of how to compare two different proc sets to each other. Now the third way is going to be pretty cut and dry. It's basically just use the build editor. Just go to UESP, there's this website that I have here, I'll put it down in the description below, and you just create a new build. You do need to have a user page, but you can sign up for one. You don't even have to put down your email, you just pick a username and password and that's basically it. You can then create a new build, and then I'll show you my Magicka Warden build. This is the wrong build, but same concept applies. So you basically can just use this build editor and just make your own build and replace whatever sets you want to replace, and then the ultimate number you're going to want to take a look at is the effective spell power. This is basically the same thing as the ability metric on my spreadsheet. So you basically just take a look at whether your effective spell power goes up or down depending on whether you change out your sets. Now the beauty of using the build editor is that you're able to include things like buff uptimes and things like that. The kind of downside is you won't be able to specify specific percentage uptimes on buffs. That's where my spreadsheet is a little bit better than the build editor. It basically allows you to have uptimes and it'll calculate the correct damage accordingly. Unlike here with the UESP build editor, it's basically all or nothing. So you have this scathing mage up or you don't. That's kind of one thing you want to keep in mind if you use the build editor instead of the spreadsheet. That being said, the build editor is a lot more robust than my spreadsheet just because you're able to search for your specific sets that you want. You're able to greatly quickly change your bonuses and things like that. You're able to have your CPs all lined up and things like that. So I do recommend using the build editor if you want to take a little bit more in-depth look into how different sets compare to each other. This is probably going to be the most time-intensive way of comparing sets, but it's definitely going to be the most thorough way of comparing sets. So if you really want to really dig into the numbers, I would highly recommend taking the time out to actually do this. You'll find that once you set it up, you can actually change out sets fairly quickly using the kind of setups that they have down here. So you can very quickly equip certain sets. Let's say you want to equip, let's say, armor plasma or something like that, you can just say I want it on the body, I want a Julian weapons, you can just change it. You can pick the type. If it's a crafted set, you can pick the traits. So after a while you get very used to how this build editor handles, and then you're able to very easily just kind of take a look at spell damage, the spell power, write it down, and then swap out sets and write down the effective spell power there, and then just compare the two that way. There you have it. Those are 3 different ways you can tell whether a set is going to be stronger than another set. Now again, there are a lot of different nuances and kind of situations that you're going to want to take into consideration when you are taking a look at things like this. So a big example would be like, are you taking a look at Major Force uptime when you're comparing Mother Sorrow compared to Julianos? Or let's say Master Architect versus Sororia. Are you taking into consideration, how many stacks you're getting for Sororia compared to Master Architect, or where you're basically going to have at least 40% uptime on Major Slayer if you're on a Bagclaw or a Magical Warden or Magicka Nightblade. So there are still some nuances there. Ultimately, the best way to determine this is going to be through basically dummy humping. You just have to do a bunch of different parses, get some averages together, and compare the averages. Ideally, you would do this with a friend that's able to give you some raid buffs, so you have a more comparable parses to each other, just because solo parses are a little bit difficult to compare. But as long as the only thing you're changing is the set itself, then it shouldn't be too hard to kind of figure things out. Ultimately, my recommendation would be to use a combination of this build editor and then my spreadsheet as well, to kind of get a sense of how different sets and scenarios compare to each other. Use the build editor to get a good idea of what sets you want to compare first, and then use my spreadsheet with your top 3 combinations in order to, and then just play around with your raid buffs to kind of see how differing raid buffs would affect each of your 3 different kind of sets there. So that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. Hopefully you find this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.